Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the VMblog Expert Interview Series. And today we're going to try to do something a little bit different, like we haven't done before. And that is, we're going to talk today about a new book that's out, written by my next guest, Leo Reiter, the author of the book. And, Leo, welcome to the show, first off.
Thanks a lot, David. It's great to be here.
And full disclosure for those watching, Leo and I go way back. We worked together in past lives at a VDI startup here in Austin, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I want to say it's about 10 or 12 years ago, something along those lines. I think more like probably 12. So yeah, by today's standards, that's a lifetime, I guess.
So when you originally reached out to me and let me know that you had a new book, I was pretty excited. Sent me the book here.
Yeah.
Showing to folks at home. To kind of jump into the conversation, maybe I can start off by asking you to tell VMblog viewers a little bit about yourself and your background, why you wrote the book, which is titled Blueprint 7.6, and maybe tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. So I've been in software my whole life, been professionally involved, probably about close to 3 decades now. In cloud, actually, before it was called cloud, and you know this, David, you go kind of back along the same background there. So probably about 20 years in large scale server-based computing, and then that becoming cloud. I live in the Atlanta area. I did live in Texas for a while, but now I live in the Atlanta area. I have a great family, a great house, and I'm still working in the industry in some very exciting stuff. But I wrote the book because, over the last 2 decades, I spent a lot of time kind of, I wouldn't say perfecting, but kind of iterating on a process to take technology from kind of the project level and take it all the way to a valuable product. And when you translate that to a company, it would be, think of like an early stage startup that has a good idea, and then turning that into a valuable product business that somebody would be interested in buying or partnering with or something along those lines. So my background is purely software and heavy on the product side as a product leader. I'm also a developer. So for me, this stuff is things I've been doing my whole life. But I think, the book's going to lay out in a good sort of chronological order, a pretty straightforward sequence for how to do that. And obviously, it's something where, as a product leader in your respective company or space, you're going to have to adapt to your own situation. It's not, it's not a prescription. It's more of a description, which, kind of in product speak is what we aim to do. And it really teaches you to be pragmatic and iterate and kind of, to figure out what's really important, what's not, what do you have to do now, what can wait, and then some what I call block and tackling stuff, like how to recruit and retain developers and how to talk to the market, how to understand the value proposition, all these different things that you're going to have to do throughout the lifetime of that product evolution. And, it's written for, obviously from my perspective, it's going to resonate a lot with product leaders or, chief technologists or anybody who's in product management or product development. But I think, I wrote it in a way where it's not academic at all. It's purely anecdotal. It's based on experience. And I like to use a lot of metaphors and a lot of sort of references to pop culture and kind of, history and things of that nature that really anyone can relate to. So if you've been around the space, even if you haven't been kind of in the product leadership role, I think a lot of it's going to make a lot of sense because it's things that you've already been exposed to. So my belief is that anybody who's just interested in technology and how to evolve technology is going to be able to, find something interesting in this book. And it's also a pretty quick and I like to think entertaining read. So that's good high level overview there.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I got out of it too, was that it didn't really seem to me as I was reading through it, right, that the book was written for one particular person, or you were going after one specific audience. You kind of you alliterated to that, but it seems like anyone kind of on the periphery, right? Whether you're a project manager, a product manager, a developer, it seems like anyone can, especially someone like you and I who have been in startups, right? Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's a really good book written in a really concise, entertaining way to kind of get that point across, to get some of that expertise that you've gotten and things that you've seen over the years, all written down on the pages of a book.
Yeah, and I think that even if you're in sales, right? I mean, in this industry, as you know, I mean, sales, you're not selling stuff out of a catalog. These are really difficult solution sales. A lot of technical involvement. Even the least technical of all sales guys or people in this space tend to know quite a bit about technology just by being around it. And of course, if they're taking these products to market, they kind of witness the evolution on their own, especially in the startup environment. So yeah, I think it's a pretty broad reach, and my hope is that even if someone's just curious, that it's going to give them valuable insight that they can at least apply to their own function or their own curiosity, right?
So that's a good point. As the author of the book, what's one thing that you hope that whoever picks up this book takes away from it?
Yeah, I think if I had to say, there's a few important things, but the one thing I would say is really understand the true purpose of software, and that is pure and simple, plain and simple, to solve problems that people actually want to pay to have solved, right? The people paid to have solved. So if you're building stuff that doesn't actually solve problems, or you're investing a lot in projects that are technically interesting but that don't really advance that agenda of solving an actual real world problem, you're probably investing in the wrong things. And obviously, if you're doing that within a gigantic organization that has tons of money, and worst case scenario, maybe your project is cut and you're reassigned or something else. But if you're doing it in a startup context, you're driving the company to failure by investing in the wrong things. And because not only is it expensive, but you're also not capitalizing the market you're supposed to be capitalizing. And then your timing, is blowing up and all these different things. So if you really just focus on the problem, then that's always true north from a product evolution perspective, even if it's mundane, right? And technologists are, and I'm one of them. I think you're probably a little more evolved, David, but I would still consider you a technologist as well. We love the high hanging fruit, right? We love just going after the really hard problems, whether they're relevant to anybody's day to day or not. And the truth is, a lot of people and businesses who buy technology have very specific problems to solve that, when you look at them, they're not super interesting, but they're incredibly valuable. If you solve those problems, it has downstream effects that it makes them more profitable, it makes them able to do more things. So if you focus on the problems, that's the main thing about the book, is continue to focus and make sure that you're solving the problem. And that's going to keep your product market relevant, and it's going to lead to the right outcome for your business.
Now, as I said at the beginning, I know you don't rest on your laurels. You're always learning new things and applying those things that you've learned. Besides Blueprint 7.6, maybe you can tell us what kind of tech or business-oriented book you recommend everyone reads, or maybe tell us what you're reading these days.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the first part of the question. So I'll give you two for the price of one. How about that? Because
Okay.
I think the second book is something that's good for everyone, whether you're in business or not. But the first one I would recommend is Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. I like to think of that as product marketing 101, and it's really about how to get your products, how to position your products to be exposed to a mainstream market from kind of a niche. And to me, one of the best lessons in that book that I read it a very long time ago, but this is something I'll never forget, is understanding competition. Because everyone thinks, well, I've got this product and there's no competition. Well, that's actually not true. There's at least two types of competitors to every product that you build. And it's one being, what are people doing now with no other products exist? And the other one being, probably somebody else has a product that kind of addresses that as well, whether it's like yours or not. So the first one being the market alternative, the second one being the product alternative. If you don't understand those things, it's very difficult to position a product and talk to customers. Like you're selling them something. Like if you're selling a word processor, and this is probably dating me using language like that, but you're selling a word processor, you have to know that, okay, you're competing against typewriters, but you're also competing, if all else fails, if it's too expensive, pen and paper, right? And that's the market alternative. And just understand, you have to provide much more value than the market alternative if somebody's going to pay you money for it. and then at least some more value than your product alternatives, because you need to be better than the competition. But if you don't understand how, like, that to me is the most valuable lesson in that book that I remember. But it's just a great book to read. And the second one that I want to mention, which is not a business book at all, it's more of a society/psychology book, and the book is called Factfulness. Hans Rosling, and I'm just reading the co-authors here, Anna Rowling Ronlund and Ola Rosling, excuse me, Hans Rosling. And the great, I think that book was on Bill Gates' summer reading list a few years ago, and I was looking for things to add to mine. I said, oh, that sounds really interesting. So I read it. And it is one of those things where, and it was written a few years ago, but it kind of foreshadows the COVID-19 pandemic and kind of the reaction to it. Yeah, it's just one part of it, but that's not what the book is about. It's about being able to put things into context and understand how to hold like two opposing ideas at the same time. Like, this is bad, but it's still better than it was, X number of years ago. Or, just being able to look at context when you're looking at facts. When somebody throws huge numbers at you, what does it actually mean? If it's 1 million, well, is that out of how much, right? Things of that nature. And I think if you were to apply it to business from a product perspective, it's one of those things where two things can be true. One is that your product is pretty good, but another thing is that it could still be better, right? And just having being able to conceptualize those two things, evangelizing it aggressively, but at the same time, working hard to improve it, and just having the mindset to be able to do that. But that's a great book to read just for society in general. And what I'm reading right now, when I'm not reading nonfiction, I like to read science fiction. So I'm actually reading Peter F. Hamilton's Judas Unchained, which is the second book of the Commonwealth series, the original Commonwealth series. So pretty cool. If you don't know Peter F. Hamilton, in a nutshell, just millions of characters, millions of settings, and everything just kind of converges eventually. But you have to kind of like really follow, and there's all kinds of plots going on, and it's pretty complex. It's mostly mysteries set in a sci-fi context. So really interesting stuff. So that's what I'm reading now.
And I guess that means at some point you may want to try your hand at writing something in the science fiction realm, right?
Well, without spoiling too much, I do have a project. It's actually an embellishment of a story I wrote when I was a kid. Just I guess young adult. And I'm kind of coming at it now from a different perspective. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy writing fiction. What the problem I have with fiction is, it's hard for me to imagine like book length for that. So it's really, I can really think of a lot of short stories, but when it comes to like telling a long narrative, which is, I'd like to read a book that takes a little while to read when I personally read. And I find that, at least for me, nonfiction is a little bit easier to do that with when you have, a lot of things to say.
Now, not to be too cliche, but did you learn anything new along the way while you were writing this book? I know, and I've written 2 books, very
Right.
boring, based on virtualization back in the day, and as I wrote it, there are things that you're researching and adding to it to kind of build upon it that maybe you didn't know ahead of time. Did you have any experience like that?
Well, for sure. I mean, Blueprint 7.6 specifically is very anecdotal and very experience based. So there was a little bit of research just to, whenever I referred to something, I wanted to make sure it was being accurate. I wanted to make sure that, should I also be referring to this other thing or whatever. So there's definitely that. But it's not the kind of book that you say you want to write about. I don't know, something trendy like these kind of murder mysteries now, where you like decide you want to write about a crime that occurred in Louisiana in the 1960s or whatever. That takes a ton of research to get right. I mean, it's a whole different animal than something that you kind of write as an anecdotal experience book. But what I did learn that I think is really eye-opening, and it was to me, is that you can actually write a full-length book 10 or 15 minutes at a time over a long period of time, and there's actually no shame in doing that. And because obviously I'm not a full-time writer. I have a full-time job. I have a family, so that's like 2 full-time jobs. And I was kind of doing this at like 6:30 a.m. before kind of starting the day, and my fear was that, okay, I'm going to end up with, when I finally go back and read this thing, it's going to be like 200 individual paragraphs that don't, or sections that don't actually, that are not concise. But I think what you have to do is you have to write an outline and spend a lot of time on the outline, right? So the outline, so think about like when you sit down, you say, I want to write this book. First thing you do is you write an outline and just imagine the book while you're writing the outline. Here's what I'm going to talk about. And spend weeks iterating on that outline and just kind of, making notes and saying, not just structure, but notes to yourself as to what you want to talk about in some of those sections and so forth. Because that kind of keeps you on track. I still had my first review, my first sort of individual review pass was very much about gluing things together. And that was, but surprisingly, just because of the outline, I think it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And by the second and third draft, it was already like, okay, now it's just a matter of catching, typos and clarifying and things of that nature. And then I hired an editor, which I think everyone should do. That's another thing where, I was like, well, do I spend the money on an editor? Do I, how do I choose an editor? All these things. But that to me was like it's a great decision because he brought a tremendous amount of value and kind of really put the finish on the book that I think made it something that somebody can read. So, but I think the main lesson is it doesn't matter how much or how little you write at a time, just write it down. And eventually you're going to have to read your own book like 30 times, whether all at once or in pieces. So just accept that and accept that it's not going to make sense the first few times and just keep iterating, right?
Yeah. I think that's great advice for anyone who's writing any type of book. It's I follow a similar process when I did mine, so I think you're spot on there. Now, as we wrap things up, I know obviously everybody goes to Amazon for books, but how can folks get their hands on the book? What formats are being made available to folks?
Yeah, for sure. I thought just based on kind of the global, technology is very much a global space that we live in. We work with colleagues from all over the world. So I really thought the Amazon marketplace was the right place to deliver that, given that it is global. So it's available in all the marketplaces. You'll have to just search Blueprint 76. So that's three words. And then it's available in Kindle or paperback format. So you can download it and start reading it. It supports Kindle Unlimited, so if you have that subscription, it's a very low cost way to do it as well. And there's obviously a preview mode for Kindle also. But yeah, just go to your friendly Amazon website in whatever market you're in, and go from there.
And for folks, I'll do a quick search inside the video. I'll in the show notes, I'll go ahead and put some links. Hopefully, sure, that helps helps people searching for the book.
Yeah, and I have one of these or a couple of these universal links that kind of figure out where you are and send you the right marketplace. So we can certainly add those.
All right, that'd be great. Well, Leo, it's great to catch up with you personally. It's been a while since you and I have seen each other. I was excited to hear about the book, and I'm excited to share it with all of the VMblog viewers and the folks who are watching this video.
Yeah, likewise, David. It's too bad. Last few years has made it tough to travel and so forth, but that's all thankfully starting to look like it's behind us. So I'm sure we'll see each other again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks again, and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.